Now let's put on our graph the effect of the price floor and evaluate how surplus or different groups within society are affected. All right, so I'm just going to recreate our graph. 200, oops. The equilibrium was quantity of 60, price of 80. But our price floor is set at 100. Giving us a new quantity demanded and quantity supplied as we solved for in the last video. Now we want to see the effect on surplus. So keep in mind that the actual quantity exchanged is 50. And I always like to draw a line up from the quantity exchanged, just so I know that's where trade stops. Surplus, of course, will be the area between demand and supply out to that quantity of 50. We're going to break that down a little further and detail consumer surplus and producer surplus. Recall that the goal of the price floor was to help producers by maintaining a higher price. So as we evaluate surplus, we want to address whether or not the policy does a good job of achieving that goal. But let's start with consumer surplus. So the consumer surplus will be the area between the demand curve and the new price in the market, which is 100. So to find consumer surplus, we can find the area of this triangle. Notice that consumers are very clearly worse off in this case as they are paying a higher price and consuming a smaller quantity. So, boo. All right, so we've got 200 minus 100 for the height, and the base will be 50, giving us consumer surplus of 2,500. So just like I told you, consumers are worse off. If we compare consumer surplus before the price floor to consumer surplus after the price floor, we can see it's lower. And it will always be lower as consumers pay a higher price and consume a lower quantity. For producers, there's kind of a mixed bag here because producers benefit by getting a higher price, but they're harmed in that they sell a smaller quantity. So producer surplus could actually go up or down. And in order to figure out whether as a whole producers benefit or are harmed, we would need to calculate producer surplus. So here, in order to calculate producer surplus, right, we identified that area on the graph, but it's not a triangle anymore. It's some kind of trapezoid here. In order to find the area of that shape, we should take the point here where we have a quantity of 50 along the supply curve to break producer surplus into a triangle and a rectangle. So I know how to find the area of those shapes. So we have to find this price here, the price along the supply curve where the quantity is 50. So I'm going to take my supply curve, which is, oops, P equals 20 plus Q. And I'm going to plug in 50. And I see that the price here is 70. That's the price that splits my producer surplus into a triangle and a rectangle. Then I just need to calculate the area of that triangle there at the bottom. That's 70 minus 20 times 50 times 1/2 plus the area of the rectangle. The height is 100 minus 70. And the length is 50. And we don't multiply by 1/2 because it's just base times height for a square or a rectangle. Okay, so now I can plug that into my calculator and get my producer surplus. And we do see that in this case, if we compare producer surplus before the price floor to producer surplus after the price floor, that producers as a whole benefit from this policy. So producer surplus has increased, consumer surplus has decreased. But not all producers will benefit, right? So you can see here that each sale gets you a higher price, but there are fewer sales, right? So some producers may not be able to sell as much or at all due to the impact of the price floor. And we see this with all price controls, that even though we're trying to increase the price in order to help producers, there's always some unintended consequence of that when we do that through price control regulation. All right, so on net, bad for consumers, good for some producers, maybe bad for other producers if they're unable to participate in the market.